Hi everyone, welcome back to part 4 of my Rivian deep dive. We abruptly stopped at discussing free cash flow, operating cash flow, and again, free cash flow is the result of operating cash flow less capex. So you can see that in 2024, free cash flow was a negative almost 2.9 billion, and 1.1 billion of that came from the capex spend. In 2025, based on management guidance, as we discussed, it's 1.6 billion negative, let's call it drag from capex, but the total free cash flow is a negative 4.3 billion. So there's a substantial other driver. And the main driver we can already see on this page, because the sort of the starting point in operating cash flow calculation, and we'll discuss this in very much detail later, is the net loss. And you can see the net loss was 3.3 billion. And so you can do like a very quick rough proxy of free cash flow if you just look at net income or net loss. In Rivian's case, it's a net loss, and add capex. That gets you to, in this case, 4.9 billion, which is not day and night different from the ultimate free cash flow number. Again, I don't recommend using this method all the time, but a quick high level view gives you a rough estimate. So there are some other drivers, and we'll discuss them. But the big picture is this negative free cash flow is driven by continuing net losses. So every time the CFO talks about non-cash charges, to be honest, it's kind of a red herring in this direction. So with that, we should look at how the cash balance, and keep in mind cash balance should not just be, cash and cash equivalents or the cash balance as it's shown on the face of the cash flow statement. You should always look at the balance sheet, and you should consider how much short-term investments is there, if any. And in Rivian's case, they this changed over time, but bottom line is including all liquid assets, and that's the correct way of looking at this, is significantly decreasing. And you can see this here. So 2024 closed at 7.7 billion. By the way, I forecasted mid 2024 for end of 2020 7.6 billion. So I was right on the money, just saying. And it basically then drops to 6 billion, significant loss, and the main driver is the free cash flow. So financial professional might look at this. Oh, wait a second, AJ. If I start with 7.7 billion in 2025 and I end at 6 billion, that's 1.7 billion less. But you're telling me negative free cash flow is almost 4.3 billion. So where is the delta? Because it should drop by 4.3 billion. The explanation is this forecast fully accounts for all of the announced VW Group capital injections, and there are quite a few of them, and also includes a timely release of the DOE loans. And only because of these two huge capital providers, Rivian's cash flow is not turning very quickly negative, i.e. bankrupt. But you can see, even despite this massive funding from the DOE and VW Group, because the business is so operationally loss-making, Rivian is still falling short of capital in 2027. Because by my estimate, Rivian's Rivian always tries to maintain round about 7 billion in cash. And for someone like Rivian with massive cash burn, this is where you want to be, because people always comment in posts that, oh, Rivian sits on so much cash, they can't go bankrupt. This is not how it works. Once an automaker gets into what's viewed a low capitalization state, in Rivian's case, that would be probably no later than at 5 billion, probably sooner, people would price in capital overhang, i.e. companies capital undercapitalized, even though at 5 billion would still be far from bankruptcy, of course, but it would only be, because of the huge cash burn, only several quarters away. So people would start pricing in the dilution because they know a capital raise is coming in some form. And the problem is, the longer, like from a CEO's perspective, and I advise CEOs and CFOs in my career, you always want to look at, okay, what's like the kill zone for my company? Let's say in Rivian's case, that would be probably, the kill zone would be 2 billion. I explain in a second what the kill zone is. Then you want to add like market buffer where the market kind of gets crazy on you. Add another 2 billion, so you're at 4 billion. 4 billion is where the shit really hits the fan for you as a company. But as a CFO, you want a risk buffer on top of the shit zone, 4 billion. And that's why you add another risk buffer of, in Rivian's case, it's around about 2 billion. That's why you get to a minimum of around 6 billion. And that's why the minimum for Rivian is like where you feel comfortable as an executive is more like 7 million, because the moment you go below 7 billion, you kind of start trending into your risk buffer. You deplete your risk buffer, and once you get kind of to the shit hits the fan zone of near 4 billion, you're really in trouble. And the problem is, once you get into that level, there can be a quick spiral downward. And God forbid, if you are then forced to raise equity or other types of debt, and you have like bad market conditions, I don't know, some conflict breaking out, big one somewhere, and the cost of debt that you can raise explodes, or the market might be, I don't know, not closed, but it might be very difficult to raise equity at some reasonable amount of discount. I mean, there's always a discount when you raise equity, especially for a company like Rivian, but your discount to TERP, that's the technically correct way of looking at discount. So the TERP is the theoretically right price. I'm not going to explain what it is because it exceeds the scope of this presentation, but bottom line is, shareholders suffer enormous dilution. So to prevent all this risk, you always want to have like a healthy cash cushion, and that's why, unlike many laymen think when they see like several billion in capital, this is not that much in reality, given all these risk buffers. So this risk buffer concept is crucially important to understand in assessing the minimum effective capital for a company. In Rivian's case, based on my experience in decades in the industry, I would say this is probably 6 to 7 billion minimum. And now you see like one huge weakness in this forecast, because you see, well, AJ, you're telling me Rivian needs to hold 6 to 7 billion, but you're also showing in this forecast that the cash balance goes down to 4.4 billion in 2026, and even 2025 looks a little close to what you just explained at 6 billion. And then look at 2027, it's even dropping below 2 billion. So this means this forecast is very, very optimistic, because as I said before, I'm accounting for the DOE loan plus all the VW Group capital injections. This means over the next 3 years, there will be other capital raises coming from Rivian. This is basically, if you believe this forecast is somewhat accurate, and we go through everything in detail in the later parts of this series, there is no way for Rivian to get away with more capital raising as the latest set out. That is not on the table. This means another capital raise, and it will be a dilutive one, of course, is unavoidable. And given the implied magnitude of the capital gap here, if we just keep the 7 billion in mind, because the thing is, when you raise capital, it's another point people never really think about. The capital raise is not back to your minimum level. The capital raise is always intended to raise the level to a level that gives you at least 3-4 quarters of runway before you yet again touch the critical level. So if you apply this logic, then you can see that here in 2025, if you want to be near the 7 billion level, you need to not only raise, let's call it 2.5 billion to get to 7. You need to raise probably more, something like 4. However, there's one big uncertainty. We don't exactly know the release of the DOE loan. If the DOE loan is released mostly already in 2025, because I expect some share to be released upon achievement of certain milestones in 2026. If the DOE loan is released early, mostly in full, then they can avoid in 2025 another capital raise. But if my working assumption is correct, there might even be a raise in 2025. So keep that in mind. But even with the DOE loan fully paid, basically the forecast implies that Rivian has to come to market in 2026. So my assumption is what's going to happen is it doesn't really matter when the DOD, it does matter when the DOD loan is being paid, but RJ, Rivian CEO, will basically jump on any opportunity in the market where he can raise more equity at attractive terms. So with that, this is the end of this part, part 4. So I hope this was informative. Hope to see you in the next one, part 5. Next.